Record. So we're recording, we're continuing. I hope everybody had a good Labor Day weekend. We're going to continue with lesson 6 and continue to style our web page. And we're still working on the nav bar. Where we left off, let me review this just a little bit, is that each one of our potential or future links or buttons that we have here have been styled to look a little bit like, three-dimensional buttons. And how we did that is that when we selected it and then added a selector, it was very critical how we named it. And what you need to look at anytime you add a selector and you want to affect certain things, and when I click on it, notice that the buttons highlight in blue. That's what you want to see, because then you know it's targeting the right thing. If it doesn't happen, like I said the other day, if I come back in here and I just remove this space between .row, .nav bar nav, notice that all went away. So it could be just something as simple as a space. And so I continue, if I'm not paying attention or if I'm not sure, make these mistakes myself, and then you need to go back in and tinker with it. But to make sure that everything is working, don't go too far ahead. Make sure that as you are working in the lessons, that everything is working the way it's supposed to before you move forward, because it will be easier to troubleshoot. But what I wanted to show you here are both of these, and to understand what's going on. Yeah, remember, it's a series of, I think of them as rectangles or boxes nested within, inside one another that targets it. So, for example, the first row here, the first div or division, if you want to call it, is generically sort of, but it isn't. It is a correctly or syntactically named correctly. Is .row, okay? So that's what we want to target inside that row. So that's where the name over here starts, .row, then space. Well, what do you want to target inside that? Well, we have the nav bar. That's what we want to target, is the entire nav bar. Not anything necessarily within it, but just the whole nav bar, okay? And that's where we added the background gradient. So this is going to be .row space .navbar hyphen default. And it could be named something else instead of navbar or default. It could be navbar background or something like that, but default's a good one. So that's nested within that. Now, within the navbar, we have more specificity that we're targeting here. So again, we have .row, we have our .nav bar nav, that's the navigation within that. And now you'll notice that we have it's not caret, it's the right arrow, list item, and our pseudo selector, a selector. So that's what it's targeting in here, just these potential links. They aren't links to anything just yet. They're going to become an important part of it. So one nested inside another. So it gets very specific. It only targets that row, and within that row, it targets the nav bar, and within the nav bar, it only targets those specific items. Now, if you remember, these A-links are pseudo selectors. So if you've looked at the textbook, and there's 4 different states that you can have for that. There's the A-link, which is your default or normal state in a button, or link to some other page or something. So that's what we want to focus on first, because as you can see, the text is almost unreadable, okay? Then you have another one. You have an A visited. Now that can be the same as the A link, or it could be different. If you've ever done a Google search and you have a whole list of a whole page of links to other sites, and you go back to your original search, once you've visited those sites, you'll notice that they look different because they have they've specified for visited something that looks different. On our website, we're going to have it look the same. Okay, so I'm going to show you in a minute how to do that. The next is the hover state. And you'll notice that when I hover over this, this is the default for the current nav bar that we have, that when we hover over it, it goes in black. We're going to change the color of that. We're also going to change the background too, so that that changes on the hover state. Then the last one is focus, and we're not dealing with that, but that has to do with if you have key strokes that affect links, then you would want to apply a focus to that. So that's what we're doing now. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add to this. I'm going to double click over here. Actually, you know what, before I go any further, since a couple of you may have had issues, what you have to remember anytime you're working in here, and is that if I click on my file tab up here, you'll notice that I'm locked into, or linked to my site folder. Now, if you don't have that, or you forget to do that, remember you have to go to site and either create a new site, or if you didn't save the other one, then if you save the other one, then go to manage site. Now I renamed mine so that mine is Art 196 Fall 2020. And when I double click on it, okay, then I can go into the specifics. This is linking to the root folder. And as I mentioned a little while ago to some of you, that every time we do a new lesson, you want to link the root folder to that lesson folder. So when I click on here, on this little button, it goes to the folder lesson 6. And then you'll notice within that folder, we have an image folder. I want to make sure that it targets or is linked to that image folder, not to an image folder in lesson 5 or 7 or any of the others. So I don't want to change that, but now I go under advanced settings, under local info, and at the very top where it says, excuse me, default images folder. When I click on that, okay, notice that it is the image folder, but make sure that it's located inside lesson 6 for the one that we're working on right now. And there are only 2 images, but that's okay because you're going to have the same images in almost every lesson. So it would be easy to think that even though your images are showing up on the screen when you're working locally, that when you publish it, they would appear, and they won't if they are targeted to the wrong root folder. Okay, so every time you come in, make sure that you are set up with the right site so that you're managing the right root folder. And then you'll notice that whatever pages you've saved should be immediately visible inside there. Okay, so next thing that I want to do, go back to where I was. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to double click to change the name of this. So what I want this to affect is our A link. So that's A::LINK. Okay. Make sure that I only have one I, and I accidentally hit a double I. A link. So that's your normal state. And then I also want the appearance of this to be for the visited state too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this, Command A for select all, Command C for copy, and then after A link, I'm going to put a copy, or a comma, not copy, comma. There we go. Hit the right arrow key, hit the comma, space bar, and then I'm going to paste. Now, I don't want this one now to be A link, but I want it to be A visited. So A visited is that other state for the pseudo selector I was talking about. And hit the return key twice. And now I can affect. And again, when I click on it, it highlights it. I'm good to go. So the next thing that we want to change for the dynamic here is we're going to change for this. Hold on here. I want to change the color of the text to be yellow. Okay, instead of this gray that we can't see. So for the A link and the A visited, now I can come over here to my, and I can select all right now to my CSS Designer. And I'm going to select the T for text. And where it says color, that's the color of the text. So know that nothing is selected. It says there isn't a color. So why do you see a color in there? Because it's inheriting the default from what was established with the navigation bar that we inserted. And now we're going to create a selector that overrides that. So what we want to come in here, and I want yellow, which is the FFC, and then click OK. And notice that it automatically changes it. So I'm good to go. Okay. So success. The next one is we want to change the hover state now. So that when we hover over this, notice that it's the same now. We don't even see a difference when we hover over this. So we need to now create one here. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on here. I'm going to copy. I don't need to copy because I already did that before. I'm going to go ahead and create a new selector. And I don't want any of this here. So I'm just going to paste what I had before. I'm going to paste. And instead of a link, I'm going to now remove the word link. And I'm going to put in hover, H-O-V-E-R. So it's A:hover. Hit the return key twice. And now we need to create a different state. So what we're going to do here is that what I want to do is I'm going to go to the background. And there isn't anything specific, and we want a gradient. Okay, and we're going to use what we had before. What I want to do is I want pound. Let me make sure that I have my hexadecimals here. And the top one, I want to be, make sure it's pound or octothorpe or whatever you want to call it. And I want it to be 069, 069, okay? I had the bottom selected, my bad. Let's make sure that that's what I have. 069, there we go. Now the bottom. I'm gonna select that and I want that one to be pound 08A. 08A. There you go. And I want to make sure that this is set to the number of degrees at the top is set to 0 degrees. I can see that okay. And I can't see very well for whatever reason. I want to make sure it's set to, well, for our purposes, close enough for a moment. I need to make sure that that's set to, I'm going to set it to 0. There we go. Okay, so it's set to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that. And now I'm going to go ahead and click off of it. So I have a gradient. And now when I hover over that, let's see if this is working. And it's not working. So let me go back and change that again. Let's see what we have here. This should be for the hover. So let's go back again. That's set to 0. That's what I mean. When things don't work, you need to make sure that, oh, because I made a mistake here. That's a link. I don't want a link. I thought I double clicked hover. So I need to put that, oh, I don't want that for a link. Here, I have a bunch of them in here. So I want a link. I want I've got too much in there. There we go. See, I added it, but I have others that are canceling it out. So I goofed. A hover. There we go. That's the only one I want in there. Okay, so now let's do it. Let's see what we get. Do I have anything? No, it's not working. A tabular? I don't know what the heck that is. Let's go back out of it. A table, my God. What am I doing here? I don't know why that's there. A colon hover. Off of it. Now let's see. There you go. I told you, you know, hopefully all of you can see now that you can see that as I hover over it, it's the same gradient that we have for the background, but it's reversed. And so it's a nice subtle little effect. The other thing that we want to do too is on the hover state is that we want to change the color of the text. So I'll go back to hover and I'm going to go back to text. And you can see nothing for this particular selector, nothing, but I'm going to go back in here and I want to select white. Okay. So I'll go back there. Let's go back and add for hexadecimal. Let's make sure that I have absolute white in here. There we go. Make sure that I add that to my, I already have it in here. There we go. So again, now when I hover over it, I get the reversal of the gradient, and I also see the white text so that I know and I can see clearly what link it is that I'm selecting. So far, so good. I don't know why when I was pasting, but it's something that you need to pay close attention to make sure that that's, you know, all correct. And I just wanted a hover here, and that was it. Okay. So one of the last things that we need to do for this now is we need to center that. Notice that all the links are skewed to the left, and we need to center it. So we have some rules that we need to change in here. So in addition to that, we will be just about done with the nav bar, and we can work on a header today as well. Another question here. Now Dan has a question. Remember, you want to know how to change the font or the color in the menu at the top. You can override that. So the question is, how do you change the font? Oh, I did answer it. Okay. Yeah, you would have to, you know, but for someone else, if you don't like that font, where you have the A link here, this would be where you'd want to change it. And right now, I changed the color, but I'm not changing the font. So you have font. Here are all the variants, the font style. And we are going to change fonts for the main content a little bit later. And you can change, you know, the font weight, font size, line height, and on and on and on. So here's the font family right here. And we're going to get into font families and how that is kind of critical in web design. So, okay, good. Okay. Okay, so how do you center this? Well, we need another rule. Surprise, surprise. So what I'm going to do, and this isn't going to be the default, but I'm going to go ahead and with the row selected, I'm going to go ahead and create another selector here. And I'm going to make it more specific. I want it to be row.row space, and I want it to be .nav bar hyphen nav. Okay, that's all I need. Return key twice. I click on it. Whole thing should highlight. I believe it does. We'll find out in a minute. Because now what I want to do is I want to change the width. So I have to do this in a couple of different ways. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. And to be perfectly honest, after all these years of doing it, I still don't have an explanation as to why you're going to see that we're going to add certain margin paddings and that sort of thing. But I'm going to go over here, make sure that I have the layout selected. And here in width, notice that it's selected to auto. Well, we're going to select a specific number of pixels. And when I select the pixels, it's at 0. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to 715. So they've already kind of pre-done this, made this work. So 715 pixels. There we go. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to affect the margins. So the margin is going to be top and bottom, and this is the shorthand. You can do this by hand, and if you use shorthand, the way that they work this box modeling for CSS is that they start at the top and they go clockwise around. So top would be 0, right is going to be auto, bottom is going to be 0, and left is going to be auto. Now you can do that this way, so I can go ahead and click in here and select auto, 0 or whatever. And you do, even though it default is selected to 0, you have to do it anyway. It doesn't recognize it. And then I'm going to click in here and just type in auto. Or I can come up here and use this setting. I'm going to put in 0 pixels, 0 px, and then I'll put space, and then I'll write auto, and then hit the tab key. Okay. Now you'll notice it still isn't centered. So one more thing I need to do, and this is where I don't have an explanation for it, other than I know that we have to do it. And what we do down here is we're going to go down to, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add what is called a float. Okay, so I'm going to put in float. And I want none. Let's make sure, let's see, is it moving? It's not moving. So I goofed up. So there's something that I did wrong in here. Now, I'm going to go back and look at the textbook myself, and I'm going to go back in here and make sure that I have this. And I didn't write it right. So that was it. It's dot row, dot nav, dot nav bar, hyphen nav. No, that's what I have. So why isn't it working here? So let's go back in here. Maybe because, how about if I put a space here? No, that's not it. So, see, we've run into a snag here. Okay, that should be right. I have Nav Bar. There you go. See? I can't spell. I can't proofread. I can't. That's why. I told you it's one character off. And there you go. Now it's centered. One character. And it can screw everything up. And I just remember back in the day, when you were adding, wanted to add hover state, things like that, you were adding JavaScript, and you were going in line by line, and it could sometimes, because if it wasn't working, because I had to look in the code, it would take me a day to find the mistake. So that's where it was. Yeah, I missed the V. So if you're a bad typist like myself and a poor proofreader, it can make life kind of a living hell, especially when you're trying to do this yourself. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to create another one now for the margin for the nav bar itself. So I'm going to come back in here, and we got a couple more things. It's sort of a cleanup, because there is a gap between, whether you realize it or not, between the nav bar and the header, and I want to get rid of that. So I need to go in here and I need to create a new selector, and that's going to be dot row. So this is very generic, dot nav bar. Make sure I spell it right this time. There we go. And the only thing that we're adding to this is to the bottom, we're adding 0 pixels. So that tightens everything up. And you don't notice, you notice something change, but it really isn't that visible until we actually go ahead and we start adding content to the header. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to add in the header. So we got to make sure that the header is selected. Let's make sure that not head, but header. And I'm going to do that from down here. And I want to make sure that the column small 12 is selected. Okay. So that's the easiest way to do that. I can do that from here. Come back in here. Or let me try it from here. And if that doesn't work, there you go. Make sure that it's not the row titled header. Make sure it's the nested column small 12 inside it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add some text. And what we want to do is under insert, okay? What we're going to do is I don't want bootstrap components anymore. I want HTML. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a header, and it's going to be an H2 tag. Okay, why H2 instead of H1? I don't know. I just don't know. Okay. And when I begin to do that, notice where it asks where I want to put it. Again, it's in the upper left-hand corner, and I want it nested inside that. There you go. So now I've nested inside that, and we're going to style it in a few minutes. Okay, so I'll highlight the content, and what I want to do is I want to name it Green Start. Oh, come on. There we go. I want that highlighted in orange. Come on. Sometimes it's just easier to do it from the code view, so I'll do that. So I'll name it Green Start. Green S-T-A-R-T. There we go. And there we go. So now we've got some styling to do here. And then after that, we're just going to hit the return key. And you'll notice that it automatically added a paragraph tag. And that's okay. So what we're going to do now is within that paragraph, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add from the code view down here, not space. I'm going to go ahead and add on all caps, green awareness in action. There we go. So in addition to the text, okay, this needs to be styled, it needs to be centered. We're going to add color to it, change the font size, change line spacing. We're going to, in the header itself, we're going to add a background. But notice just by adding the H2 tag and a paragraph tag, it's already expanded the content of it. And when it will be even more apparent when we add images to this, you know, that it really stretches it out. So that's what we need to do. Okay. So is that clear to everybody how to do that? Yes? No? Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to format the text. So what we want to do for the header.row, okay, is we need to go back now to our style sheet. And we're going to now focus not on the row for the nav bar, but for the row header. So I'm going to go ahead and with the header selected up here, I can go ahead and I can add a new selector. There we go. So we want, here we want header.row, because header is the correct syntax for this. So I want this, and we can get rid of the column 12. We don't need that. You could leave it if you wanted to. It just makes it a little bit, I don't want all caps either. Header space dot row. We don't need column 12. space H2. So it's going to target just the H2 tag. And that's it. And now what we want to do is we're going to make it green. We're going to make sure that we change the font family. We're going to use a group. Impact will be our first choice, and I probably need to talk about that briefly too. So let's go ahead in here and hit the return key twice. Now we can select it. Now we can go to font, and I'll change the color. And I want it to be this green here. I want it to be, what's the color that we want? We want 0F0. So is that it? No, that's not it. So I want it to be 0F0. 0F0. There we go, real bright green. Make sure that hex is selected here, 0F0. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that to our color here, real bright green. So I'll go back here and click and make sure it's changed. And what did I change? I didn't change it. So, oh, I know why. I told you. Because I have a space. I didn't want a space. There you go. Again, one character off and you get screwed up. Okay? So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on the font family. So now that I got that working, and again, it's a good practice, you know, as I'm, you know, working on this and I'm making mistakes, to make sure that you save when everything is good. And probably what I should do right now is go File, and just say Save All, so that not only is the page saved, but the style sheet. And now I'm set to go. And as long as you continue to have issues, you really need to struggle with it and be tenacious and get it resolved before you move on, because it will be a bear to figure out where the mistake is later on. And again, it's probably something very simple like I did, just, you know, a space where you don't want one, or, and the other case, I forgot to put the V, no, you know, so it was Nav Bar, not Nav Bar. Little things like that just can wreak havoc on you. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to change the font family. And the one that we want is where it's down here. It says Impact, Hefstedler, Franklin Gothic, Bold, Arial, Black, and Sans Serif. Now, if you're wondering why there is a font set like that, is because this for years has really driven designers who are prefer print. It's driven them crazy. Is that if the end user doesn't have the font that you have specified and it's not embedded in your page, it will default to the next font that's available that you have specified here. And if they don't have that, then it will go to the next and the next and the next until the very end, where it just uses a generic sans serif typeface. Okay, that's the nature of web design. That can be really kind of, can mess you up if you're not careful. So for the most part, myself, web design, I stick to pretty generic typefaces so I don't run into that problem. Probably the next thing that we want to do for this is that we're going to add a drop shadow for this, which should be pretty nice. So we're going to change the H here to 0. Right. We're going to change, oh, come on. And we're going to change the V shadow to 5 pixels. And again, this is something that you couldn't do before CSS 3. So if you can see, it's very subtle, but a little drop shadow. Now we need to specify the color and the blur is going to be 5 pixels too, if I remember correctly. Yep, 5 pixels. And then the last one is the color for that, and it's going to be black. there, we have a little drop shadow there. Okie doke. So probably the next thing that we should do here is, I'm probably, yeah, I knew I forgot something because that's awfully teeny tiny. That's small. So the next thing that we need to do is change the font size. And this is another thing, you can specify it in pixels, but I don't recommend you do that, or points. That was a hard transition for me to make when I was starting web design, because you want the type to scale to the size of the monitor that's being used. And so we're going to use instead percentages. And that's what you want to see when you do that, because it goes to 0%, and so it just disappears. Because you know that it's targeting the right thing. Now I'm going to put in 350%. And that's a good size, okay? So there we go. Now we need to do a few other things, okay? We need to center it. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and under font, let's see, where are we going here? I forget myself where they're located. I know it's in here somewhere. There we go, right there. Text align, I want it centered. Boom. You don't have many choices in web design in controlling the location of your type. It's generally flush left, centered, or flush right, and that's it, or justified. And then there's other machinations that you have to go through to change it. But anyway, we've got that. So we're good to go with that. So now what we want to do, and this is where it gets, even more complicated, is that we need to create a custom class, because we want the word start to be different. We want it to be white and not green, okay? So if we were in InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop, you would just highlight the text and you would make it the color you want. But that doesn't work here. You have to create a special class for this, okay? So what I need to do is I need to create around this, it's called a span tag, okay? So just around the word, or the letters start, I'm going to put in here, and I'm going to do it in, let me see. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and double click the whole thing here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Command T. And I'm going to put in here span. And it should have put a span tag around the whole thing, which is what I want. Now, what do span tags do? They allow me to control and be even more specific within all of this whole group. It gets kind of nuts after a while, it really does. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and within that, I'm going to create another class, and I want it to be named. So let me highlight just this text here. And you'll notice at the top here, I have, within that span tag, I have a little plus sign here that I can click on. And I'll click that, and what I want to put is dot, because this is a custom class that allows me to be even more specific. And I will name it logo white. Make sure that I'm spelling it correctly. Okay, and now I can come in here and notice that it added that custom class to my selectors here. Now I can go into text and I can specify the color, and I can specify white. So let me select hexadecimal. Okay, select white, and I'm going to go ahead and click. And I didn't want the whole thing white. That's not what I want. So I need to change that. And I want the span tag to be only where start is. So I'm going to take the opening tag for that. and I'm going to move it so that it is right in between green and start. There you go. Weird, huh? So now I'm controlling just that word. You have to ask yourself sometimes, is it worth it? But if you want to be that specific, if you want to do all of these, these things in web design, it's something that you have to do, especially when you're building from the ground up. Okay, so the next thing we do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to target, and I'm not sure that this is the right color for the green, but I'll come back to that later. In fact, I'm almost sure it isn't. It's a little bit too bright, but it works for the moment. Anyway, we're going to focus now, and that will probably end our day today to finish this, is the text below here where it says green awareness and action. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing down here. We need to create a new selector for ourselves that targets just the paragraph within the header. So to do that, I'm going to put in header.row and then a space and then a P. So I'll go ahead and add a new selector. And I'm going to, before row, no space this time. I goofed last time. I want this to be header.row. And that's not to be confused, as I said, with the head of the document. Header. There we go. Hit the return key twice. And now when I click on it, that highlights in the background in blue. And that's what I want to see. That's a good deal. That's good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to affect it. We're going to go, and font family is going to be a little bit different for that. So we'll focus on that. So the font family now is going to be Lucida Grande, Lucida Sans Uniform. So we're going to come back in here under type, click the type one, and we're going to go in here. And I want the font family to be Lucida Grande. So we'll select that. We want it to be the font weight. We want it to be bold. So that looks a little bit nicer. We want the align properties to be center. Now we're going to dress it up a little bit more. We're going to add the color to it. If I didn't do that already, this is going to be white. But before I do that, let's go ahead and add the shadow to this. So the text shadow, again, the H is going to be 0. The V this time is going to be a little bit smaller. It's going to be 3 pixels. And the blur is going to be 5 pixels, same as what it was before the header. So we'll make that 5 pixels. And the color is going to be black. Come on. Come on. Aren't you changing to black? There we go. But now we need to make the text white because black on black doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So back at the top under color, I'm going to select white. That's not white. Let's go back to here. Let's add that. Select it, and we're good to go. But then a couple more things. We want to stretch it out a little bit. So, oh, you know what I forgot to do? What I forgot to do? And I think I forgot to do this for the, yeah, forgot to do this for the other as well. For header row H2, the shadow, it isn't just black. We're going to use Rgba. And you can see right now that at the very end, when you use Rgba, A stands for alpha. And the default is 100% opacity. Well, I only want it to be 50% opacity. So if I put 0.5, okay, no, not 4, 5. There we go. I should be good to go. There we go. That softens a little bit. I need to do the same for header row P, do the same thing. So instead of the color for the shadow being solid black, I want it to be, I'm going to switch from hexadecimal to Rgba, and then I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit softer, so 0.5. Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll add that to our library of colors. Go back, and that softens it a little bit. But still, one more thing. We want to stretch it out a little bit. We want to change the letter spacing, or if you're working in Photoshop or Illustrator, it would be called tracking. So what we can do here is under letter spacing, again, we're going to use a form of percentages, but it's going to be in M's. So I'm going to put it, letter spacing is going to be in M's. So we'll put that here. And instead of 0 M's, because that's sort of the default, we're going to put 0.5, which will stretch it out a little bit. 0.5 M's. There you go. So it's stretched out and real nice. So as you can see, for every little thing that you want to do, that would take you, just a couple of minutes in Illustrator or Photoshop. Takes a bit of work. You first have to create a selector or a class that targets exactly what you want. And then, or if it's going to be generic, that will affect a lot of things to come. Right now, these classes that we're adding are all very specific that won't be used again. And it does take a long time to create them. But the nice thing to know is that once it's done for your first page, it's done for all the other pages. And that in the future, if you create additional websites that are very similar in their structure, but maybe the colors are changed or you change the fonts, you've already created all the styles that you need. And you just need to go in and edit the styles and save it as a separate style sheet so that you can apply that instead. So it's just the initial setup, so to speak, that's the hardest part for all of it. Okie doke. So now we're going to add a background, and let's see how far. We won't be able to take that far today, but we can go ahead and we can begin to add a background here now. So again, we want to change. We don't have a generic one for our header, so we need to do that. So let's go ahead and select the header. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new selector for it. And I want it just to be header.row and nothing else. So header.row, and this is what's going to affect it. So everything inside this header.row will be affected. And the first thing is the background color. So in the event that someone is using a browser that doesn't recognize it, we can use a generic color. We can also specify under the layout category, we can create some padding for all of this so that that works correctly. We probably need to add a little bit at the bottom here. So what we want to do here for this is that under here, we're going to add some padding here. And I'm just going to use the shorthand method. So again, if I click in here, it's going to be 20 pixels. So remember, that would be 20 at the top, 20 at the bottom for shorthand, because we go clockwise. 20, and then we'll 0, 0, and then that's what we have there. So I'm going to hit 20 pixels, 20 pixels, and 0 pixels, 0 px. Okay. There we go. So now you'll notice that that changes. And then we're going to have to come back and notice that the padding here changes. So we'll have to change that. Okie doke. So it actually, the header increases by a total of 40 pixels by doing that, just to let you know. Okie doke. So now we're ready to add a background image. We'll start by doing that. So what we're going to do over here is select the background. And you can see that we can add, for background images, we can add a gradient, and we can add a background image. And actually, we can add a couple of them, but we're going to have to do that. Add the second image from the code view. You can't do that from here. So, but we'll start by clicking here, and it should automatically take us to our root folder, and within the root folder we have our images, and we're going to use this fern image for the background. And by default, what happens when you put in a background image is that it automatically fills and it automatically tiles horizontally and vertically. So now what we need to do is we need to affect the rules so that, because we have two of them right now, and we want to make sure that we only see one. That's all we want to see. And then what we want to do is we want to affect it so that it's the right size. So background size property is going to change to 80%. And then the position is going to change to 80%. And then we want to make sure that it's a single image. And then it's, and that's what we can do here. Notice that background down here, repeat, is automatically selected to multiples. Well, I only want one. When I do that, now I only see a single image there, but it's not positioned where I want it. So that's where we need to change that. So in the background property, under, let's see, we want background size. Okay. We're going to go ahead and we're going to change the height to percentage. And we're going to change that to 80%. Now, I always get these turned around because there's the height and the width. So I'll change this to 80 and see what we get. Oh, come on, wrong one. I don't want that one, and I don't want that size. There we go. I want this one, and I want this to be 80. No. There you go. And I don't want the background position. I wanted the background size. So I keep goofing up here, down here. Okay, that's too big. That's background size. That's 80%. That's way, way, way too big. I want the height size. So I probably change the width size to 80%. So that's where we don't want to change. Yeah, I told you I always get them messed around. So we're going to change this one to 80%. So the height size is going to be 80%. And this one will be changed to auto. UTO. Oh, come on. Having a hard time here. Come on. There you go. So now that's working better. And that's about right. I had these, if it looks distorted, and it is, it has to be turned around. So that's about right. So, yeah, the height value needs to be 80%. And that's about, that looks pretty correct. And now what we want to do is we want to center it. So to center it, what we need to do is a little bit different. So the background positioning, that's the next one. We're going to do that now. So what I want to do is I want to select center I think it's from this one. Probably we'll find out. Nope, well, I'm gonna go ahead and do that one. That did center it that way, but I want it centered from here. There we go. So now it's centered. This one I can get rid of. No, I don't want that one either. I want this one to be. No. See. There we go. So that's centered. And the other is 0, so that's fine. So now before I do anything else, and I'm going to do one more thing today, and then we'll probably call it quits, is while I got this thing working, I'm going to make sure that I have it all saved. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to name this one Working File 3. Now, you don't have to save multiple versions, but just for demonstration purposes, I kind of like doing that, so I can always go back to earlier stages of this. But again, in the event that the browser that you're viewing your page in doesn't support CSS3, then you need to put some sort of background color. So again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to select all. I want green styles. I want to come down here and I want header row selected. So that's there. And then we're going to go ahead and background. And the background color is going to be 090. So that's the hexadecimal. If you're wondering why I'm using only 3, instead of 6 when it says hexadecimal, it's because there are versions of this that of colors that are actually, it's actually 090090. It's duplicated, I think. Let me put that again, 090. No, it's not that one. I guess it's 00 here. 009900. That's it. So you can see where they're duplicated, that you only need to put, and that's in a few instances where you can put just half the number and that's it. So I'll select that for a new one and click. And now I should have a background color. The next step that we're going to do, and we'll continue this on Thursday, is we're going to put in a second background image and have it repeat horizontally so that we get the stripes that go along the back. Okay. But this one, in order to do that, we need to go into the CSS style sheet and add it in order to do that. So before we finish today, are there any questions before I stop recording? Let me go ahead and take roll for everybody. Is this sort of making sense to you guys or no? I know it's just, yeah, it is, okay, a little bit. You just have to be, okay, yeah, it's making sense. So at first, I mean, it did for me, but it's best if I kind of think of this in kind of like Tupperware. You know how you can buy Tupperware things that one container is nested inside another? Well, that's how I think of this. I think of this in kind of literal terms, and that you have the container of the entire page, and then within that is another container, and then, you know, in the rows and the columns, we have other containers, and within those, we have additional containers. And depending on how specific you want to get will determine how nested those containers are. And that's the, you know, the kind of specificity that we need to develop in order to have the look that we're going for. That you just can't select the type, select the image and paste it and put it in there and use layers and that sort of thing. It just doesn't work that way. So, anywho, before you guys leave today, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just say goodbye for now. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording. I'll pause it. And then I'm going to take roll. And then if you guys have any questions, we're fine. And then we'll continue with this this lesson on Thursday, and we'll see how far we get with that. We'll probably be able to finish it up Thursday maybe, or very close to it. And we'll have a working template for our page, which will be kind of nice. The initial ones for the header and the nav bar generally take the longest. The asides and the main content will be less taxing for us. They'll take less work. And then in the future lessons, that's where we're going to put the bulk of our effort will be in the asides and the main content, different ways of adding content, which is what you'll be doing for your web pages when your final website will be to create one based on the template that you've created in here. So I'm going to go ahead, talked enough here. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. Say goodbye for now.